Kia ora everybody, and welcome to the PGA of New Zealand Lockdown Series 2.0. Today, we're so lucky to have Sean Foley with us, who's going to be here to talk to us today about who he is and some of his journey. And we're also joined by Josh Longy, who's the Education Manager here at the PGA of New Zealand. So welcome everybody, and we hope you have as much fun as we're going to have.
Here now, we'll rip straight into it and take away some of the pleasantries. From what I've heard in some of your previous stuff is that you always tune out and ignore the intros. You don't pay attention to that crap.
Yeah, don't even waste time with the intro.
Exactly. So I guess what I wanted to go here is, from doing a bit of research on you, I've got a bunch of words here that seem to always describe, and they were quite consistent in what people were describing you as. And they were open and honest, hardworking, 0% bullshit, woke, reflective, straight talking, vulnerable. So I guess then, what would you point to as sort of the challenges either in your childhood or up through to when you're at university, I guess, that you look back on are some of the things that shaped you as you've moved into adulthood?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything shapes us, right? But I would say for the most part, just being comfortable, being uncomfortable is key. And, understanding that you have very little control of what goes on, period, in your life, your game. So you have to be able to focus on those things that you have an ability to affect. And I think that the rest of it, you just got to let it go by the wayside and accept that you'll never understand it, or that you don't have all the stuff, the good times, the bad times. I think too often we label thoughts and we label times. That was a good time. That was a bad time. I think you would technically call a bad time. A year later or 2 years later, you look back at it and you're grateful to have went through it, because, life is good, but life is hard. And I mean, just look at the fact that we're doing a lockdown right now, whereas so many of us thought a long time ago that this would just be a flash in the pan, everything would be back to normal. And so just the ability to adapt to a new reality, you can sit and complain about it and bitch about what it is and what it's not, or you can utilize that time as an opportunity to find a different way, shift the paradigm, become better at what you do, and become clearer in how you live. And I think that, I've been fortunate in the sense that, I was pretty lucky as a kid. I had two parents who cared for me, gave me opportunities. I would say that my dad's from Glasgow, so he was pretty cheap. So my brother and I had to, we probably didn't have to work for it, but he definitely made us work for it. And I think at that time I probably couldn't stand him, but now I'm really grateful that he did that, because I feel like, over the last 16 years on the PGA Tour, I feel like I pretty much outwork anybody. And I think that's a huge part of it, talking about. Guy asked me a question the other day. He said, you picked up a couple players within the last year, or a few players, and Lydia was one of them, and said, look at the success she's having. The other one's kind of having some success, and the other one's not having success. And, I charge the players that I coach 5% of what they earn on the golf course. That's 5%. So that means when they win, that's 95% them, 5% me. When they miss the cut, it's 95% them, 5% me. So when you look at someone like Lydia, I mean, she really is she's just trying to max out her potential and see how good she can be. And, people like her make coaches look good. It's only coaches who can make someone like her look bad. So it's a different kind of mindset that she has, and how much she works out, and how much it means to her, and how focused she is on all that. So, it's easy to get frustrated at the other players who don't put quite the effort in that you think that they should. But I think my job is to try to tap into why they're blocking themselves from manifesting their potential. Lydia's quite clear now. She knows what she wants to do. She knows why she's doing it. And as we all know, she could do it ever since she was like 10 years old. So it's not like I haven't taught her anything that obviously you work with someone like Lydia, and, you have to ask a player when you start to work with them, do you think your best years are behind you or ahead of you? And so someone like Sam Horsfield says they're ahead of me. Someone like Ben On says they're ahead of me. Someone like Ann Van Dam says they're ahead of me. But someone like Justin Rose or Lydia Ko, it's quite easy to answer, like, my best years are behind me, because you look back at those years and they were so crazy good. They were so crazy good. What's the use in continuing? And I think that, self-determination is everything. And, I think both of those players have seen the younger players there. Now Lydia is young. She's only 24, but I feel like she's been around for like 50 years.
Yeah, she's been around forever.
When Patty Tabatanikit won the ANA and Lydia finished second, Patty said, you always have been my hero. You're still my hero. And I think Lydia's only like 21 months older than Patty, right?
So,
yeah.
She is kind of like a granny in quite a few ways. She's got definitely severe wisdom. But you still just continue to try to progress and move forward. And I just think.
For sure.
What's your main role with Lydia? Like, so, as a coach, you can be many different things. You kind of alluded to it there. It's like, and I remember you saying it about Tiger one time, like, what can you really teach these people about the game? They've been doing it forever. What is your main role with Lydia? What does the day-to-day look like with her?
It's just the kind of, she doesn't really have to learn anything. We've been through all that. We've been through that part of one, forgiving oneself for the mistakes that they made, to understanding that, the pain that we go through can't come from outside of us. Media, critics, anything like that. You choose to be affected by that. No one knows what we're going through except ourselves. And I think success sometimes is completely a smokescreen for people who are wounded. So we look and go, wow, they're so successful. How can they have mental health issues? But, I hope everyone on this phone call can learn that at some point you may have everything you set out to have and realize that you're not that much further ahead. So it's but that's it though, right? It's success, passion. I think success, passion, and ambition are almost bad words sometimes. Even the word passion, until the 17th century, passion was a word that was synonymous with suffering. It wasn't really about that. It was all about obsession and going too much that way. So I think with that, it's that, and then kind of reconstructing, trying to get her move back to where it was when she was at her most natural, but with some upgrades to her club face and her rotation through the ball.
Nice.
How much of that? So in terms of when you say rotation through the ball, I know she's done a lot of work with Damien, right? Her S&C guy. And I saw an interesting stat. I think the aim point guy set it out the other day around her distance actually pre-working with him and then post. Did you find that as that? I think there was something about 14 yards maybe that she picked up over the course of a year. How much did that change to the way her body was moving and what her club face was doing? Was there much yet to rein in or not really?
Yeah, I think that stuff gives you the ability to do it like for a long time. So yeah, I think with the women in golf, they all have strong enough legs and strong enough cores. Where they get at a slight disadvantage from a biological standpoint is that their hands and arms aren't as strong. And so two difficult things, they're often hypermobile, so it's difficult to find end ranges of motion. That is difficult. Second is it's okay to create ground reaction and forces, but if you can't transmit and stiffen tissue throughout the rest of the system, you won't really transmit the force into the club as much as you would anyways. So, I think what Lydia did with a lot of, when she got quite a bit longer, some of it had to do with the length of her backswing, trying to get it longer again so she can create more of a linear impulse for longer, more time to create speed, and then trying to get her into like higher levels of counter rotation so that the club could naturally shallow out, and getting the center of mass behind the hand path, we can create some pretty solid vectors that help us transmit the speed too. So the rotation you've seen has just come really from the fact that she doesn't have the club coming down in front of her and she's not standing up and backing up. So trying to get her slightly flatter and flatter with how her hand path moves on both sides has just been like a slow goal. But she's probably a year away from being like what I think it can be.
Mm-hmm. So it's obviously you've made some pretty nice inroads with her move, with her golf swing technically, and we can all see the evidence of that through some of the results. The thing that I'm quite interested in is you've obviously been on a bit of a journey yourself in terms of the introspection and the meditation and the books that you read, and you've obviously been able to work with some of the game's greatest players. How much of some of the learnings that you've had from other people and yourself have you been able to impart onto Lydia? And in terms of, I guess, being able to impact the way that she might think about the game, remembering who she is as a player, and where she's at in her career as well.
I think the difficult part, like with Lydia or someone like a Jordan Spieth or a Tiger, is so much of it came so natural to them. I mean, they obviously worked hard, but like chipping was easy right away. Like bunker was, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think sometimes when they kind of lose their way, it's difficult for them to be able to put the pieces of the puzzle back together because they just did it.
Yeah.
They just did it. So I think that, getting them to understand at a higher level, really mechanically what is occurring, I think is really important. I think we just live in a society that's too based on like keeping it simple. And I just think that's why everyone is, dumbing it down is why everyone is dumb, right? So it's, she's smart too. She's really sharp. So, we went through some kind of heavy technique sessions where I'm trying to get her to understand this is why this happens. This is why this happens. And then basically she goes and plays for a few weeks and then comes back and I see her a few times. I normally have to put it back together because she's just such a good player that she will just start to be a chameleon to whatever environment she's in. I mean, I thought it was amazing to go to the Olympics in that time zone change, play in that heat on that golf course, and then fly to Scotland in a completely different completely different wind, completely different weather, completely different clothes, and be able to, almost win back-to-back weeks. And you cannot find more of a different environment than that. And I think that, that's the benefit of her staying in great shape and working out a lot and paying attention to what she puts in her body. All that really adds up. Like, being a pro means a lot more than, like, the golf swing is very simple. It's an easy thing to deal with. The golfer is much more difficult. And so, recognizing over when we first started, and even to this day, right? I mean, trauma is trauma. It's with you forever. There's no way you can reframe it. So there's still scar tissue from when the game was really, really hard. And so that's the difference, right? Before, there was this pure innocence and like, this is pretty easy. And then it becomes difficult. And so, you used to not see like that right bunker in the fairway, and now you do. You used to not see, see like long left was a hazard, and now you do. So it's just, it's trying to really just, chip away at the ego and chip away at the need for external results and adulation. And that's difficult to do because, pretty much our first primal instinct is to be accepted by our tribe. Otherwise, surviving wouldn't be happening. So when everyone's telling you you're amazing, you're flying. And when everyone's telling you that you're shit, it's, I mean, and you're a teenager. Pretty crazy. pretty crazy to think what a gift and curse it would be to be number one in the world at anything at 17. I mean, when I was 17, like jumping out of my bedroom window to go to my girlfriend's house and not getting caught was like success. It wasn't. I was number one at. I was number one at anything. We'll put it like that.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I think another comment that I've heard you make on the Andrew Rice podcast. I'm not sure if you remember it, but you made the comment that it's okay to have fear because fear is in our DNA, and I think that sort of touches on the point what you're saying before. When we go back to our primal instincts, is to be accepted by our tribe, and it's to be learning to live with fear is something that was obviously important back in the day when having to run away from all the dangers in life. And how does that how do you utilize that and use fear to your players' advantage and even to your advantage in your own life? Because I think a lot of your players have worked with Dr. Gio Valiente, who wrote the book Fearless Golf, but your viewpoint on that is to almost embrace fear.
Yeah, I mean, Gio's a friend of mine.
Yeah.
And yeah, we like to challenge each other for sure. I think the thing is, like, Gio's a psychologist, but he's got a PhD in philosophy. I think of him more as a philosopher. I think of a lot of people in coaching as philosophers, right? So there's no such thing as being fearless. It's just not possible. Telling people to be positive and have self-belief and to be confident in themselves. I mean, I was just reading this quote by Thich Nhat Hanh where he said, faith comes from the fruit that practice bears, right? So it's, and Thich Nhat Hanh he's still living. He's a Tibetan Buddhist who was kicked out of Tibet. He's amazing. He was one of Tiger's favorite people to read. So it depends on what you're afraid of. So are you afraid, like, you don't make the New Zealand national team, what people will think about you? You don't shoot a good enough score. You're afraid that you won't get a scholarship to the United States, because if you get a scholarship to the United States, then everything will be better. It's the fear of letting your parents down, the fear of letting your coaches down. See, because now that's out of your control. So having fear over things like that is, I think, easily remedied if someone tries to buy into and understands kind of the philosophy of why they shouldn't feel that way. Most people's funerals, there's like 6-7 people there whose life will be different forever. And everyone else is either one, thinking about what it would mean if they died, or two, when they get back to work tomorrow, they're probably not going to think about you anymore. It's unpleasant, but it's life, right? And we have to adapt and survive and move on. So doing anything for anyone outside yourself, I think, puts you into a potentially powerless position at some time, because at some point, if you can't live up to what they think you can be, even if you're succeeding, you're still going to feel like you're failing. So it's like a fine line between, going all in and then being content with the person that you are. So I think that is important. So when you look at a player who feels like they're letting down their country, I mean, a 5-iron is hard enough to hit. It's way harder to hit thinking about that as your hit.
Yeah. Couldn't imagine that.
Well, but that's the thing though, see, because now what's going to happen, because trauma is in the eye of the beholder. So if you take a guy who is in the military and he joins up for the Army and does 6 months, and then he's shipped overseas and he gets into a firefight or a gunfight, he could have potential really bad trauma from that. But if you're special forces, you're trained in that situation all the time, there's less trauma. So, but it's a fine line between when that doesn't get sociopathic, where there's just total apathy, period, right? So I think, like, we all have trauma and we've all dealt with stuff. And for some of us, that could have been one day when our dad just said, I'm not proud of you. And who knows how much of a rabbit hole that took us down. So much of that stuff we probably don't remember. But all those things potentially become triggers in future days. And next thing you know, you got a player on the course and they're doing really well, and they're doing well enough that their families decided to fly in to watch them. And as soon as they see them, they're 5 over through 9 holes.
Yeah.
And it's not the fact that they're there. It's got nothing to do with them. It just has to do with this incredible memory that we have. And unfortunately, human beings are more wired to remember the bad than the good.
Yeah.
So, until you can break through, once again, right, all this goes back to survival, right? As far as we've come being able to do a call like this from New Zealand to Orlando, and it's perfect and it's clear, we still have grown men bombing other grown men. Like, we're emotionally not moved on from the time we were cavemen. Right. And just think about, you just think about, like, trying to unlearn all these things. And, I think, honestly, I've been traveling around the country and some of the world for the last 10 months. If I never read a paper or turned the news on, I would not know there's a pandemic going on.
Wow.
I wouldn't know it. It's like, I understand there is one. I understand, like, a lot of people have lost their life, and that's awful. But you will just realize how much more scared you are if you haven't been doing what I've been doing, because you would just be like, okay, it's there, but that's a little egregious. You know what I mean? That's a bit much. So it's like, fear is such a part of political systems, religion, you name it. So we grow up in it. And that's I would call nurtured fear. Then there's the natural fear, which is not fitting in and not being a part, of a tribe or a winning team. I mean, why do you think people love teams so much, right?
Yeah.
Well, the problem now is these kids have teams of social media, 20,000 people. It's interesting because my Instagram account, at Sean Foley Performance, it's quite contrarian to how it's done, right? I just do it the way I want to see it. Like, I share stuff that I think is interesting and can help people, and I share it because I read it and I'm like, oh, that's totally dope. I'm thinking about that for a week, and then I just none of those things, like, do I possess in perfection, right? Like, I'm struggling like anyone else. I just admit it and work at it. You know what I mean? So it's, that I think potentially, just look at, social media has given us an ability to have mediocre people become really successful. And that kind of goes against Darwin. You know what I mean? It doesn't do it. I mean, God, I wouldn't have learned anything about trying to build a business or coaching the way I have if I was just able to go on and use 5-syllable words and work out and look really good in my videos talking about rotation and shallowing, right? Like, I'm so over all this garbage. Like, guys saying, like, look at Victor Hovland, that's the way. And then you could show 2013 Rosie and Stenson coming down completely different, and I'm not sure Victor will ever hit it like they did. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You got to be good at what you do, but you have to understand. Yeah, would I prefer Victor Hovland's move over a player who had to close the face rapidly through impact? Totally. But theoretically, what him and Lydia can do makes sense. But a theory is a theory. It doesn't mean that it's applicable to every person that you meet. So I think it's about managing, what players can do, and then recognizing that, in this kind of trend to everyone basically just holding off a release and turning their body out of the way as fast as they can, you better be a pretty decent athlete if you want to do that. So, it's all, like I said, look at everything that you see and just question it and be like, okay, why do I think this about this? Why do I think this about that? And I think what we all understand over time, man, 80% of what I think was just indoctrinated into me by these belief systems, which I don't actually think are true. I just was told it, right? I mean, it took me a long enough time before I didn't think. It took me a long enough time before I realized that Santa was too big to fit in my chimney. Right? I just remember that. I remember one night I was writing him a note and I just thought, this doesn't make sense anymore to me. Right? And sometimes you're 9 when that happens, and sometimes you're 29. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I particularly like around that fear as I want to get into a little bit of some stuff you do in Orlando with youth stuff. There was a comment that I particularly liked, and you often have players and they're like, "What's wrong with me?" And I know your response to that is like, "The only thing that's wrong with you is that you think something is wrong with you," and it's quite. I found that quite interesting, and we must, as coaches and as humans, as parents, we must play an incredible role, and I guess in creating that narrative in everybody else's head.
Oh, totally. No, yeah. I mean, if someone's hitting a snap hook every time they get on the tee, there's nothing wrong with them except that they don't understand like their golf swing or ball flight laws. It doesn't mean like you're an abject loser. It just means that you obviously don't understand something that's beneficial to knowing. And so, for years they were actually telling us of the opposite ways of doing it. And so it's like everything you learn, right? It flips around and you're like, oh, it's the opposite of what I was told. I think that's a pretty good starting point actually for kids out there is when you're told something, imagine the opposite and start working back from there.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically human beings we're learning machines, right? And in order to learn, you have to fail. And the word failure is very much like a Western word, right? It's based on competition. Whereas neuroscientists look at the word failure, they use the word feedback instead. And so it's really important, like when you hit a terrible shot and you're on the range, if you react to it, you reinforce that behavior. You have to have variability to understand like how to get more into a direct correlation of consistency. So I hit one really good, I get a vibration, I get a feeling, I get all this biofeedback into my like unbelievable computer. And then I hit a terrible shot. If I can just kind of treat them both the same, my brain at a way deeper level will be figuring out the X's and the O's. I can still just be sitting there just doing it. So you got to be able to separate you from the ability of you, because you is, I'm Sean, I was born in Toronto, all these labels that have been put on me, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, it's amazing how a lot of people just, they don't believe in themselves or don't think they're capable. And every time they eat food, their liver takes care of all the toxins in their body so that they can continue to live. Like human beings are incredible. And I just think we forget that. And so when you watch a player who hits it to 5 feet from 230 and kind of nods his hat like he's supposed to do that, Mark Brody has showed us that you're not supposed to do that. And then watching players, hit it from 200 yards and hit it to 30 feet and slam their club or have a massive overreaction. It's like at the PGA Tour level from 200 yards, greens and regulation is 49% on average. So if you hit it on the green from 200 yards, like that means you've done your job. So I think that's a deeper thing, is to get people to understand, like, I have some players who kind of go off like on the golf course and slam clubs, and I'm not really against like instant pissed offness. I'm against like continued negativity. So it's like Tiger Woods showed us that you could get upset and get right back to being clear again. The difference is that Tiger was always reacting to the process. He never got pissed off at the result. The result meant nothing to him whatsoever. So I've seen him get mad when he's hit good shots where he got good results. But, Tiger was allowed, 5 to 10 seconds by his dad to deal with it however he had to. And he did both. He didn't just slam his club. He also pumped his fist like no one before him and no one since him. So there was both, which I think is helpful. There's some duality there. But when I go work with these players at home, I will never see them ever throw a club or ever get pissed off with no one around.
Mm.
I had one player one time, I won't name his name, but the first time I watched him play on the PGA Tour, we started in college, went through the web, and then got to the PGA Tour. And I'd never really seen him play competitively, and he was getting so pissed off. I couldn't believe it. And look, if a guy gets pissed off and makes 5 birdies, then we obviously are calling pissed off the wrong thing, right? As human beings, people are motivated differently, and they're inspired by different things. And there's been so many tests done on those types of things. And so there's not one way to be, right? Some players need to be at peace with who they are, and they need to be authentic. They all need to be authentic. But for one player, that might be smiling at the gallery. And for the other, that might be not even realizing the gallery exists. And so I said to this one player, I said, hey, would you do that when you're at home by yourself? He's like, oh, I break clubs all the time when I'm by myself. And I was like, all right, well, that's fine.
Maybe you do.
Yeah, but to a certain point, people trying to impress people, that's probably powerful to a point, and then it's not, right? Because it's probably a good fuel for a while, but I just don't think that's the natural vibration of human beings. It's like you're playing golf. It's kind of more this spiritual journey and this athletic accomplishment together than anything else. So, yeah, it's very fascinating for me as a coach to go to the tournaments and kind of pay attention to who's around, if it's friends from college or high school or parents, or with junior golfers, college coaches come out. I've seen some terrible rounds of golf when a college coach is out. And if you can just get that kid to understand, like, the coach is coming to watch you because he obviously thinks you're good. The coach has been in golf for 30 years and has probably shot 1,000 times himself. So please don't go out of your way to impress this coach today, because I think the coach might be more impressed if you play shit and show humility, and might be more impressed if you play great and show humility.
Yeah.
You can't lose with humility. You know what I mean? You just can't.
The authenticity piece is interesting. I'm a big Miami Heat fan, right? So, and I know you've been working a bit with Tyler Hero, which is pretty cool. But Duncan Robinson, he just signed a big contract down there for the Heat. On his podcast was quite interesting. He talks about a shooter, Wayne Ellington, who was in Miami when he got there. And he just said that no matter what the situation, Wayne Ellington is just an absolute ice cold. He doesn't have any emotion. Doesn't matter if he's going in, if he's missing it, whatever happens. And him and another young guy, Max Struss, tried to almost emulate that for a long period when they first got to the NBA. And he just said it was an absolute disaster for him. He just couldn't possibly. He doesn't know how on earth a guy can stay that calm and relaxed. So it's quite interesting, when you do see them out there. Everybody has their own clock that they're ticking to as they go along.
Yeah, but it just depends, right? Because it's like, if we looked at the backstories behind these players, right, and we saw a guy who was really unaffected. Well, I mean, what if the guy came from the 87th projects in Chicago? I mean, he's not going to have a bad day in the NBA.
Yeah.
So that if you can get through the kind of war that you grow up in, and for some kids, they could live in a wealthy neighborhood and have a very difficult time. They have have parents that aren't there. Just because they have a nice house and they're paid for it doesn't mean that they're getting what they want. So, I think that, we were sitting there, my son's basketball team, my sons go to a private school here in Florida because the education system is abysmal. So we wealthiest country in the world with an abysmal education system. And so, yeah, it seems almost on purpose, doesn't it? So,
yeah,
right. I'm starting to get like a lot more gray. And as I get more gray, I know my mom watches these things and goes, "Oh my God, I can't believe he said that." But look, if it's the truth, I don't care. Like it doesn't. If it hurts you, then you're not paying attention. So it's the guy said to me on that ESPN podcast, he said, "You're woke," and I said, "Man, I've been awake for a long time." You know what I mean? Like we were all little kids and we're all having fun with strange kids, and it didn't matter what our religion or race or culture or anything was. We were all pretty cool with each other, right? So I always say adults, the bad things in adults were taught to kids, right? So I think if you look at the kind of connection to it, you got to go through it to get to it. So watching someone like, you got a guy like Kawhi who never shows any emotion. You got someone like LeBron who, he argues about every single call that happens to him. He's still the best player in the world. But from my standpoint, no basketball players ever went up to a ref to contest the call and have they ever switched the call. So I think that's why LeBron is not Jordan. Because if you go back and watch Jordan highlights, his ability to accept good and bad calls he was just locked in. It was like, that play's over, what's next? That play's over, what's next? But even if you look at a great like Tom Brady, and this is what I found with Tyler Hero, is Tyler Hero has a huge chip on his shoulder. And I don't think you remove that. I think you maybe make it bigger. The problem with going that way with athletes is to use the chip on their shoulder is that sometimes at the end of their career, they don't kind of come out of it because they identified so much with what they accomplished. Now they can't play anymore. It becomes tricky, right? So, but yeah, I mean, trying to get everyone to be at peace with themselves and be the Dalai Lama, I don't think is sensitive enough. That's not thoughtful enough. I just don't feel like someone like Lydia has a chip on her shoulder, but someone like Sam Horsfield does. So I might send Lydia something that really is, is bringing her inward. And I might send a picture to Sam of a leaderboard and say, how come your name's not on that?
Right.
It just depends, right? So there's not a right way and a wrong way. I think people have been incredibly successful doing both, right? So you got to kind of know. I don't think there's 4 or 5. I just think there's a couple. But I will say that upon retirement, I think it's a lot easier for people who didn't identify with themselves, their fame, and their sport. They just showed up, checked in, went to work, did their job. When they come out of it, I think it's a little easier.
Yeah. I want to lean in a little bit, as I said before, to some of the youth stuff. And I know you've got a pretty serious program running at your base in Orlando there. I guess one of the big kind of topics over here in New Zealand at the moment is a lot around early specialization and how, we move kids throughout a program, I guess, or a sporting development, long-term imaginary pathway that exists and how we get them along. You said there that, it's probably more important to show great levels of humility in front of your college coaches. So then how do, I guess, back here, and I guess if you're dealing in with parents over there, how do you, I guess, manage parents' expectations that get passed on to the kids when really I've never met too many kids that say they don't enjoy doing lots of things. And also then kind of balancing, well, when we look at some of the elite players that exist, Rory, Tiger, even some of the tennis players, they are immensely talented at the age of 5 and 6. So how do you actually ensure that coming out the other end, someone like Lydia was the same? How do you get them to stay well-rounded? How do you convince the parents that actually to get them developing across a broad range of stuff is going to be important for them long-term?
Yeah. Parents, man, let me tell you, I'm a parent. So when I wasn't a parent, I didn't understand why parents act the way that they do. And now that I'm a parent, I still don't understand the way they act the way they do. I think what happens, like with my sons, they play a bunch of different sports. They actually hardly ever play golf. But I've only got upset at them both one time because they were disrespectful to the referee. And so if they want to become like, look, the PGA Tour is full of players who've never been on any long-term player development program. I mean, that's like 99.999% have not. Yep. Okay. So programs are part of isms. So ideas of, capitalism is the ism of a free market. Racism is the ism or ideology of race. So, performance, professional sports in many cases, especially in America, is made up of people who their only way out of their reality was to be able to get to that level. Well, that's once again, that's back to survival mode, right? So if you start trying to feel like you need to survive against the people who gave you the opportunity and put you on this earth, that's probably going to be tricky. And I think that, we've seen it a lot in gymnastics, right? We only get to see these kids 4 times, every 4 years, but there's not many positive stories that come out of gymnastics.
No.
These girls end up becoming fairly successful because they write an awfully sad book about how tragic their upbringing was. So, for me, like I said, I get it. I understand how it is that way, but I think when you start living vicariously through your kids, it's not like a kid thing; it's a parent thing. For whatever reason, that kid not performing well taps into some emotional trigger that you have of what you are or you aren't, and you feel like you're upset at the kid, but you're not. It's got nothing to do with the kid. So, and I've dealt with this a long time. I mean, I'm to the point where basically there won't be a parent there if I'm there, because unless the next kid I have, his dad played on the PGA Tour, his mom played on the LPGA Tour, I'm not really that interested in what you have to say. Yeah, it's like I said, I've seen both, right? I've seen the parents who never come out on tour. I see the parents who are there every single week. I'm not trying to say that, because some of them are just there to support them. Yeah. And some are standing on the range saying to their coach, what's going on with his driver? And it's like, none of it's helpful, right? Like the culture is not good. Because to me, when guys are playing really bad, I don't think often it's that connected to their golf game. I think it's much more off the course than it is on the course. I think golf gives us a tremendous long time to think about everything that's right or wrong with us, So, yeah, it's tough to tell people, how to parent. And I wouldn't tell them how to parent, but, what I try to do myself is just lead through example. Like, my sons probably read because they come home and see me on the couch reading. My sons say thank you and please to waiters and waitresses because they see me do that. I've yet to meet like a mean kid whose parents aren't that way. It just seems to be almost a 1-to-1 ratio. I think there's obviously unicorns to everything, but it's a 1-to-1 ratio. So, I mean, just because you've had success in business, or you're a doctor or a dentist or a school teacher, golf is just completely different. Golf is unrelatable. The only thing I think you can relate to golf is life, because when you're out there, you don't have a shortstop, you don't have a scrum half. It's just you're every position, right? And so, pushing people to their limit. There's been tons of studies done on, parents who put the fear of God in their kids over their sport, and they became very, very good. The only problem is, like, their adulthoods were not great. I'm not willing to be part of that culture to win a trophy, right? Like, that doesn't, to me, it's interesting when you look at human beings. And I think Tiger was really the first person to use the word process like often in his interviews. I've heard other athletes say it, but Tiger is the one where every time he did the interview, you knew he was going to say that. And, I didn't get to watch I didn't get to watch the Tiger Woods. I feel like I was with Tiger after everything had kind of fallen apart. So it was like a new day, right? It was just different. The world was different. How they perceived him was different. Everything was different. But he would get a lot of enjoyment out of doing things well during his practice. And there's been studies done. I can't remember the university, but it was one of the good universities, where they talked about over evolution, how human beings, how we process dopamine and neurochemicals and neurotransmitters. So there's I think it was a serotonin level that when we finally accomplish something, that feel good feeling, kind of elated, at peace, whatever. But they said that because of how we had to hunt and gather in our early days in Africa, because it took so long to actually trap wild prey, it could be 3 or 4 day chase, that we had to start releasing dopamine during the chase. So the feel good came from the chase and the process. It didn't necessarily come from the accomplishment, because if it came from the accomplishment, we probably would be extinct, because how many people would just hang in there for 4 days before they kill someone? So
Yeah.
what was interesting is that the chemicals released on the chase are actually more powerful than the ones that are released upon the accomplishing the goal. So that to me is having a structured situation where each day someone has in front of them what they're going to do. I think the great ones just find it themselves. I think if you have a hard time really figuring out what it is that you want to do every day to proceed and get better, then maybe saying you want to be great is just something that you say. Excuses are made by people who just don't want it.
Yeah, 100%. I'll just follow up on here. I know Cam's got a burning thing he wants to come across. So then if I was to write to I guess, summarize what you said there. So then kids, I guess, in an early age getting into some high level of competition, across a number of at 5 and 6 and 7. So and we've moved as a country, we've moved a long way away from that. So would you believe then that it's actually less about the kids actually competing in that environment and far more of a culture that sits around it, around everybody else in the ecosystem, that actually might cause that specific environment to be problematic?
Yeah, they're just not emotionally. Look, their brain's not wired yet, right? It's just they're just not wired yet. So their capacity to even understand that emotional part isn't even there. So they're just going to take it like a chimp. And I think they showed, like, under a functional MRI, a 9-year-old boy had the same brain capacity or activity as a fully grown chimp, right? So it's like, what do we really expect out of them anyways? Like, I love being at my son's 10, so he's still at the age where, and you'll get these blowhard goofballs yelling like, you need to focus, you need to concentrate. And it's like,
what is he doing?
But when you're concentrating, did you ever tell yourself, Josh, to concentrate? No, you were just concentrating.
Of course. Yeah.
It's free. Okay. It's like, focus is free. I can breathe in a way to incorporate and get clear with my focus. But a lot of times I'm focused and I didn't sit there and be like, all right, now it's time, let's focus. Just focus. It's like, right. It's like, so I think, obviously New Zealand is, when it comes to things like that, New Zealand's always been very forward thinking, right? I mean, you guys have a young female prime minister who I think is pretty awesome. So now remember, I'm subject to just what I read, so I've never met her, but I think she's pretty cool. You look at Norway. Norway have done the same thing, right? They make sports completely affordable for everyone from 6 to 12. They do all the sports. There's no times, there's no results, there's no trophies. I mean, it's probably obvious who's better and who's not, but none of that is part of it. And then when they turn 13, they all get put on different national teams, and then it becomes quite militaristic. That's because they understand at 13, you start to have more cognitive ability to deal with that. But at 6, it's like, that kid doesn't know why he's good. Everyone's cheering. And then, when they're not, one of my players last weekend, it's classic. Every time this happens, the entourage comes out, and when he's playing great, everyone's drinking beer and cheering and screaming. And when he's not playing well, they're all walking apart from each other on the cart path with their heads down, and he sees the whole thing. And so it's like, you're there to support him, and both levels of your support are not helpful.
For sure.
You know what I mean? So I think the way Norway did it is very good, and New Zealand's always been very forward thinking when it comes to these ideas and these attitudes. And you just look at Norway's system and realize that there's no country in the world in the winter or summer games that have created more new medalists than Norway. And I mean, Norway doing well in the summer, in the winter games, I get it. In the summer games, it's pretty mind-boggling.
Yeah, very much so.
But they've obviously found a way to get talent, not break talent's heart before talent understands. Like, you have to develop a passion for it before you bring in the mechanics, because you bring mechanics into kids and they're like, all right, this just stopped being fun.
Yeah.
So if you want a kid to rotate and side bend,
that's like 95% of golf coaching for kids around the world, though, isn't it?
yeah, just if you want the kid to learn how to rotate and side bend and keep his shoulder external longer, then just have them go over to the lake and skip rocks for 2 hours. They love that.
Yeah,
For sure.
That's and then you get what you want out of it, because they start hitting golf balls and all of a sudden it's like, hey, just pretend you're skipping rocks, and they start hitting and you're like, ooh, that thing's not curving.
Yeah.
I guess on that topic, Sean, with young people, your academy in Florida, I think I heard you say somewhere that it's about 20% practice and 80% play, and that you've obviously got a lot of players that travel from all across the world to come and spend time with you and your team at the academy. And I think you said somewhere that you make sure that they, go out into the beach, into the waves, and learn how to surf, and they've got mandatory basketball practice and all those sorts of things. So I guess how important is developing the young person, their entire skill set, physically, mentally, socially, all of that, and what does it look like day to day for your academy? Because we've got quite a few different coaching programs and academies, all across New Zealand, and I think one of the things that we want to try and do more is obviously increase the number of kids playing the game, but then trying to keep them in the game for as long as possible as well.
Well, for example, like if I was to play soccer for an hour a day, would that benefit my golf? Probably. Having higher cardiovascular ability is always going to be helpful for performance, right?
Yeah.
Heart works better. I pass oxygen through the system better. I plant my left foot, kick with my right. There's some golf to that, right? Playing volleyball, I'm going to increase my ability to use my verticals. All these sports are using posterior and anterior slings. Playing table tennis or tennis even, right? Lydia, during the quarantine, Lydia started playing tennis. And she switched from right-handed to left-handed because when she's Lydia, so she's not playing tennis. She's actually like having, she's got probably has a ball machine hitting 100 balls to her, right? Yeah. And then she's going to have to get it right. And she stopped playing right-handed because she started hooking everything.
Right.
And started playing left-handed, right? So, think about for young golfers, right? Like how many great young players have you seen who at 8 and 9 don't hit a hook? They all do, right? Like no kid who's good is slicing it. So how about you do everything in your ability to the age of 12 to learn how to hook it, and then the next 6 years learn how to go more neutral?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point there, Sean, because we've actually had a question come through from Jason Mann, who he actually runs the Sean Foley World Stars Junior Tour here in New Zealand, under the legend Marty LaRoche. And his question to you is, what are your thoughts on teaching kids to hit the ball as hard as they can and gain distance before straightening up their ball flight?
Yeah, I think there's a time in the nervous system. I believe I read it was 10 to 13, where if you really wanted to get someone faster, that's the time to do it. The problem, I think, with kids is the ways that they will do it. So creating bigger moments and moment arms, it's just how they go about doing it, right? So, but I've seen enough professional golfers who have picked up 18 miles an hour of ball speed at 30. To me, I would have them doing all the things that they could do from a movement standpoint. Is a kid going to get more powerful if he works on sprinting? Is he going to hit it further if he does a bunch of broad jumps and vertical jumps in sand? 100%. Is he going to, if he learns how to throw a baseball properly, is he going to get more club head speed? Probably, right? Just because we have an implement attached to us, it doesn't mean that the golf swing doesn't go through the 3 physiological phases of a stretch phase, a counter rotation phase, and an extension phase, right? If you look at the Hall of Fame, those guys are so glad that no one told them to keep their butt on the wall.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I don't think that's I don't think that that's a bad thing. And I think for some of our kids, you know, they love having all the different things they can do. And then we just have kids who they just are machines. And so they get, I know they're doing it because they're driven to do it themselves. So I'm not going to make him go to the basketball court if he doesn't want to play basketball. But some of the kids, they just like it to be broken up. But I do believe that, you know, every single year the PGA Tour is getting more and more full of either kids who just straight golfed or kids who played 4 other sports and took up golf at 15 and was serious about it, right? So
yeah,
it's one way or the other. But I think if you look at the top 10 in the world, you know, those guys were pretty good at most sports. There's a couple complete, just total golfers in there, but I don't think it's always that one dimensional. And I do think that the golf swing can be learned easier from other sports than from the swing itself, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think if we took kids to tennis courts and just had them hit forehands over and over and over, and then took them to the golf course, because, you know, when you're playing golf, it's a combination of pulling and pushing, right? The left side and the right side have completely different responsibilities. So, you know, it's all so different. You know, look at like all the different grips on the PGA Tour. There's so many different grips. Those grips ensure different pivots, which ensure different club faces, different releases. So, you know, I've had kids come to me with a really strong grip and I changed it because it wasn't good for them. And I've had kids come with a really strong grip, which is not my preference. And they hit the ball so well that I was just like, are you hurt? Nope. You hit it like this every day? Yep. All right, well,
let's do it. Yeah.
What else can we do?
Yeah.
I feel like I'm going to throw up on the back nine when I'm playing. All right, do you understand? What do you eat? I don't eat on the course. All right, well, we can probably start to look at some of that. And do you breathe? Not really. All right, let's just do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? You got to be careful. Like I did a lesson about a month ago. I had this girl who's on the LPGA, and she came to see me, and we got on the range, and she was hitting balls, and I used 3D. I used everything with her, and I was like, man, this is like really good. And about 10 minutes left in the 2 hours, she says, do you think we have enough time to look at my pitching? Because that's why I came today. And I'm like,
oh, yep.
Like, what are you doing? Like, whatever. I said to myself, I was pretty pissed off with myself. And I said, like, whatever happened to the time when someone showed up and you said, how can I help you? What would you like to know? Right?
Yeah.
And so it was a good arrogance check for me that obviously I prefer the long game to the short game. But I mean, I'm watching her hit balls and I'm like, this is pretty good.
Yeah.
So just things like that, you know, what can I do for you?
Yeah. I'm just cognizant of time, and there was a question that came through multiple times in an email, and I guess you know, probably like all of us, you grew up watching Tiger play. Certainly down here, you know, what am I, 37? So I was prime time for the Tiger generation. And most of your time with Tiger's been well documented. It came through you started working with them at a very interesting time. And I'm quite keen to hear what the onboarding process is like with Tiger Woods. I mean, I was working at the Abu Dhabi Golf Club in 2013 when he came out and played. And I was coaching me and the other guy, they were coaching one of the Emirati kids that had qualified. And so we were on the range, we had our coach's badge and all that crap that everyone has walking there. And even then, he was like an impenetrable fortress to even get within 4 or 5 feet away from. So, I mean, what was that like? Was it a phone call? Did he ring you? Like, was there an interview process? Like, how the heck did that come about?
I just came about because I first started work with Stephen Ames, and then from Stephen Ames, Sean O'Hare, and Tiger was really fond of Sean O'Hare. And then Hunter Mahan, and then Justin Rose. And so, you know, Tiger, he looks like he's not paying attention, but he knows everything that's going on around him. He's very observant. And I think that he's that way, but I think that his nurture of being in that environment, he became like almost a sixth sense at it. And so I guess it was 2010. It was the Cadillac at Bridgestone, and Hunter won. Sean finished third, I think. And Tiger called me that Sunday night to say, I've watched Justin Rose and Sean O'Hare and Hunter Mahan, and he said, my whole time on tour, I've never seen anyone take 3 good players and help them become great players. And he just told me that he really admired that and asked me if I could take a look at what he was doing. And 2 days later, we're at the PGA Championship at Whistling Straits, and we went out with the boys and played first thing in the morning. It was really good for O'Hare and Hunter and Rosie, because when I first started coaching Tiger, I had so many guys that I had to, my system is I work with whoever came to me first when they won. So if Hunter was still the oldest I had, and he said 9 a.m., then 9 a.m. is off for everybody. And so I remember that phone call when he called me and he said, I'll see you at 7. And I was like, nah, I got to see Rosie at 7. I got to see. So they got to play with him a lot, right? Because they'd go play together as a foursome. And that was like some of the greatest, most memorable moments I ever had, just being out on a golf course at 6 o'clock at night, watching the greatest player ever. And these other 3 guys who, they're all like little brothers to me. And that was really, that was things like that are way cooler to me than than the competitive good parts. Like I said, I'm 5%, right?
And those are the moments that nobody sees or remembers other than you, right? It kind of makes them special and unique.
Yeah, I remember one time was really cool because I was one of the first people to use a TrackMan on the PGA Tour. And so after the kind of scarlet letter was taken off my back and everyone wasn't so combative about me using a TrackMan, right? The fraud from Canada with his radar, right? I remember I did this thing one time, and the media guy said, Sean, a lot of people think you're a fraud. And I said, fuck it, yeah, join the club. I feel like a fraud half the time. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to be really, really good at something if you don't think you're doing a bad job. All right. Like, it's like I said, success is a smokescreen for the wounded. So my dad and my brother had just got into town at like about 2 p.m. And I just at this time started to make like some money. So I flew them in and rented a house like literally 500 yards from the golf course, which isn't a house like you would imagine. We're in Augusta, so you have this most perfect golf course in the middle of a truck stop, right? So the houses were expensive that week, but I think we paid those people's mortgage for the year. But it was, the backyard was nice, and we had a keg of Heineken back there, and so we were doing our thing. And I didn't know that they'd come into the gates, but I was on the range and I had Tiger and Sean and Rosie and Hunter, and they were the only 4 left on the range. And I had my TrackMan like over to the right, and they would come by and hit drivers, and then they were just discussing with what they were doing, what they were working on. And I remember turning around and looking into the seats, and I could see my brother like standing up, like pumping his fist, and that was cool. I was like, that night I was floating, right? Because it's the whole thing. I've been really lucky, right? And I probably did some jobs I wasn't prepared for. And I don't know how you could ever get prepared to coach Tiger Woods, like ever. You just can't. It's too difficult. But a 17-year-old versus 34-year-old Tiger Woods have been slightly different. But those times, I cherish those times, but it just ended up being like 5 guys all chasing the same thing. And just that moment was pretty wicked.
That's cool, Sean. Now I'm pretty mindful of time today, because I think we could listen to you talk all day long. Hours and hours and hours. There's so much information and content out there that people can consume of yours, which is really insightful. But we're so grateful for your time today. And I think you said, you quoted one of Winston Churchill's quotes, and he said, "To those whom much is given, much is expected." And I think you giving us your time today and sharing all your knowledge with the golfing community here in Aotearoa has been really cool. So thanks for your thanks for your wisdom. Is there any last thing or leaving messages that you wanted to?
Where can people check you out? Where can they see some of your stuff?
It's been a year since I had it, but my Instagram account, Sean Foley Performance. That's about it. Right now I'm in the midst of my friend George Yankas has now basically convinced me that I have to do my own web platform. So rather than get crude messages at every single time of the night from him, I've decided to do it. I've known George since 2009, and he is absolutely, it doesn't get better. He's such a beauty. He's just not right. He's so not right. But you know what? George is like, that's George. Like at one point, George being George was not helpful for his career. And then when the power went away from the normal bureaucratic roots of how you became successful in golf, and it switched to social media and the internet, they couldn't hold him back because he's just a beauty. And so that's what I've done. I've spent like the last month writing down a bunch of notes on what I'm going to cover. Never really did too much of that stuff before, just because at some point I figured I would do something like that. So that's going to be a web platform where it'll be a subscription service, and there'll be everything on there. I see it over time turning almost into a channel, because I'd like to get it to the point where I feature the people that have taught me a lot, from people in medicine to people in performance, people in psychiatry, and just kind of make it like just this incredible service for golfers and people alike.
That's exciting. That's cool.
Yeah, for sure. I'll be for sure signing up to that, no doubt.
Yeah, I've had to coach myself a little bit up through it, because I sat down 2 weeks ago and I looked at it, and it just looked like too big of a mountain to climb, and I didn't know if I was going to put the time into it or if I was going to do that. And then I just realized that I often say to myself, like, what would you say to one of your players? And basically just said to myself, you're imagining what it's going to be like. Just wake up every day, be authentic to why you're doing it, and just keep writing and keep shooting content. And at some point, whether it's 18 months or 3 years from now, if you're part of it, it's going to be great. So just understand that, we all want to climb the mountain, but we don't want to get frostbite, and you can't have one without the other. You know what I mean? Just can't have one without the other. And it doesn't matter how far you go. You still, what is it? The All Blacks still clean their own dressing room, right?
They do.
I mean, that's humility. That is respect. That's discipline. Just the tender, like the care and love that they have for the whole thing is, of course, they're amazing athletes. And of course, at the start of the game, they do that thing that for years used to absolutely freak people out. What is it? It's a Maori. It's a dance, right?
Traditional war dance called the haka.
Yeah, traditional. Yeah, I mean, rugby is technically war without guns, right?
It's NFL without pads, right? Yeah.
I played rugby. Yeah, I played rugby for a few years in high school. I played hooker. Yeah, it was a nasty little thing. I used to take a file to my soccer boots and make sure that my cleats were sharp, so when I was in the scrum, I could dig some tibias and perineums away. But yeah, I've now I've now fully resolved from my illness of short man's disease, but back then it was pretty rampant. So yeah,
so I think
that's what we have coming on. But yeah, I've just never been on social media or anything like that. I lost actually quite a few business relationships because of it, just because I look at it and it just frightens me. You know what I mean? It's just like I said, there's so many people on there. Yeah, it frightens me definitely. Something's not good when the people who invented it don't even let their kids use it.
Yeah, that's a big topic. Yeah,
it's just so easy to go on there. Like, you can go on there as a golf pro and just look at all these swings, and everyone looks so perfect. And today I saw something really funny. It was the rookies, the 25 rookies who are playing in the PGA Tour. This week was their last week. Almost any one of those swings on Instagram would be ripped to pieces, and they're all on the you know.
They crush them, mate. Everyone, yeah.
So for all the players out there, there's points when you want to get better, and then there's points where you just want to get better at doing what you already do. I think Jim Furyk's a total testament to that, right? I think he moves in an incredible way. Is it the easiest way? Maybe not. I haven't seen many people move like that, but if you do it enough, you'll learn to time it and you'll get really good at it. Jim Furyk doesn't have to call anyone when he's hitting the ball poorly. And the hardest thing I have getting through to Lydia is trying to get her to keep her ball position back and getting her aim slightly left. She hits this little push cut, but she gets aimed right and the ball gets going forward. And what's crazy about that is that when her ball goes too far forward, she just ends up with a two-way miss. And as soon as we take care of the ball position, it's on a rope. So never overlook. When Jim Furyk sets up his practice station, he does it like a surgeon sanitizing his implements. It's the same every day for 30 years, every day, right?
Yeah.
That's cool. So I guess we'll wrap it up there, Sean. We can't thank you enough for your time today. I imagine there's going to be a lot of people coming to check out your stuff, and we're huge fans of you and what you've done for Lydia and helping her along her journey. She plays a pretty big part in.
Yeah, she's awesome. I was kind of flat when I met her. I was kind of over a lot of it. Now, remember, using the word "it" is wrong because it is an extension of whatever story you've created. Like, there's no such thing as it. So it's like, Josh, it bugs me when this happens. Well, I'm the person who has presupposed the it.
I am it. Yep.
Right. So but yeah, she's just basically my favorite person I've ever been around as far as it relates to golf. She's crazy good. We played worst ball the other day. I had her go out with Ben on. I don't like people to play normal golf. I personally like if they play worst ball every day. The range is the Army where, they're doing explosive drills, but there's no shrapnel and that the bullets are blanks.
Yeah.
And then worst ball is more Navy SEAL or New Zealand Special Forces where you're in the water at 5 a.m. and it's 41 degrees Fahrenheit and you're hypothermic. That's worst ball, right?
Yeah.
And so Ben On, who I love, and Ben On is going to be a big deal, but we unfortunately lost our card and are down on the Corn Ferry, which is probably exactly where we're supposed to be at this point. I started with Ben in January, and learning that you took things for granted sometimes is a pretty good educator, and it just changes the way you work and everything. And sometimes on a PGA Tour, it just becomes too easy. It's very difficult to get your card, but it's easier probably now to keep it than it's. I wouldn't say that. It's easy to keep it. If you have 3 really good weeks a year, it can make it look like your game's in a better place than it is, week in, week out. I think the greatest stat in the history of golf is Tiger making every cut for 8.5 years or whatever it was, right?
It's incredible.
That was phenomenal. Yeah.
He had to have food poisoning. He just had to have wind switches and bad lies and you name it. And so we go to play worst ball, and Ben hits one down the first tee, like 330, this perfect tee shot. Lydia's like, whoa, wow, that was amazing. And then Lydia hits it out there about 255. Ben hits his next one in the right trees. She hits her next one like 5 feet away from the first one. And we're still not statistically where I want to be. The last month, it's been a lot better. I just think like what I'm seeing is like some of those scars are lessening. But I still see I see a machine every day, which I don't necessarily see in performance yet. She's doing great, but I know that we can do better. And then she hits it on the green. And so like 5 holes into it, Ben's probably would be 4 under on his first ball and 4 over on his second ball, right? And we get to the point where Ben starts getting annoyed because he's like, she hits it. We actually have to pick which one is worse. So I think she shot like 4 under in worst ball, which I've never seen anyone do before. And so she would have like a hybrid from 205 and hit it to 20 feet and then hit the next one to 22 feet. And we had to decide which putt was harder.
Which putt, yeah.
So I keep seeing things like that. I don't know if her best years are ahead of her or behind her. I think the best years in her life are ahead of her. And that makes me happy because she deserves it because she's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
She sure is. Well, thanks again, everybody. That's the 2020 Golf NZ Coach of the Year, Sean Foley. Thanks for your time, Sean. Much appreciated.
Hey, I never even won the Canadian Coach of the Year, right? when I got that email, I sent it to my mom and dad and my wife, and we were all laughing. And I was like, man, I was like kicked out of the Canadian PGA.
Look, maybe your best years are ahead of you on that front. You never know.
I don't know. I've seen pictures. Maybe who knows? Maybe once my kids go to college, maybe I'll just move to New Zealand and just work with you guys.
Hey, we'd love to have you.
Yeah, man. When the borders are up, we'll definitely need to get you down.
All right, guys.
Cheers, Sean. Thanks, man.
All the best. Peace.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.